Grade 12, Chapter 2, Lost Spring, Stories of Stolen Childhood, written by Anish Jung. Anish Jung was born in Roorkela and spent her childhood and adolescence in Hyderabad. She received her education in Hyderabad and in the United States of America. The following is an excerpt from her book titled Lost Spring, Stories of Stolen Childhood. Here she analyzes the grinding poverty and tradition these children to a life of exploitation. This is a story of Sahib Alam, Mukesh, and other children, those who lived in slums and had to earn their livelihood by digging into the garbages and working in the factories under unbearable circumstances and situations to earn something for themselves and their family members. Sometimes I find a rupee in the garbage. Why do you do this? The narrator asked Sahib, whom she encountered every morning scrounging for gold in the garbage dumps of her neighborhood. Sahib left his home long ago, set amidst the green fields of Dhaka. Home was not even a distant memory. There were many storms that swept away their fields and homes, and Sahib's mother told him about their past. And this is how Sahib got to know that their past was pleasant than their present. That's why Sahib and his family had to leave Dhaka and shift to the big city where he lives now in a miserable condition. Looking away. Go to school? The narrator asked glibly, realizing immediately how hollow the advice must sound. But the narrator was very much curious to know more about Sahib. Sahib responded with a sigh. There is no school in my neighborhood. When they build one, I will go. The narrator was not happy to know that. But then she said, if I start a school, will you come? Half joking, when she asked this, Sahib smiled broadly and answered yes. A few days later, the narrator saw him running up to her. Sahib asked her, is your school ready? Narrator was spellbound, and she also felt embarrassed. But then she said, it takes longer to build a school. She knew that she could not make up to her promise, and she knew that her promise was not meant to be fulfilled. But later on, after few months of knowing Sahib, the narrator asked him his name. Sahib Alam, he announced. Sahib Alam did not know what his name meant. The narrator thought to herself that if he knew the meaning of his name, that is, Lord of the Universe, then he would have a hard time believing it. Unaware of what his name represented, he roamed around the streets with his friends, an army of barefoot boys who appeared like the morning birds and disappeared at noon, were living in very pathetic condition. Over the months, the narrator had come to recognize them, and later on, when he knew about these children, she felt sorry as she was helpless to help them. Why aren't you wearing chappals? She asked one of them. The boy replied, my mother did not bring them down from the shelf. He answered simply. The other boy who was listening to them answered, if she did, he will throw them off. This is what the other boy who was standing there added, who himself was wearing shoes that did not match. When I comment on it, he shuffles his feet and says nothing. I want shoes. So when the narrator was sharing a word, the boy was bare feet and he was willing to own a pair of shoes. Traveling across the country, the narrator had seen children walking barefoot in cities, on village roads, and on the streets where they used to run around finding good stuffs from the garbages like a coin or a note. They lacked money. They were sorrowful and disheartened. This is how the story of these boys, those who were poverty stricken, makes the narrator feel sympathetic towards them. The narrator also remembers a story a man from Udupi once told her. As a young boy, he would go to school past an old temple where his father was a priest. He would stop briefly at the temple. 30 years later, when the narrator visited his town and the temple, which was now drowned in an air of desolation, in the backyard where lived the new priest, there were red and white plastic chairs. A young boy dressed in a grey uniform, wearing socks and shoes, arrived, painting, and threw his bag on a folding bed. Looking at the narrator remembered the prayer another boy had made to the goddess when he had finally got a pair of shoes. Let me never lose them. The goddess had granted his prayers, he thought, when he received the pairs of shoes or chappals from somewhere. He might have thanked the goddess for praying for new pair of shoes. This is what the narrator thought to herself, and the boy might have thanked the goddess for granting his prayer. Young boys, like the son of priest, now wore shoes, but many others, like the rag pickers in her neighborhood, remained shoeless. So this is what she recollects about the boy who wore shoes, and when he might have received the old pair of shoes from the child who belonged to a well-to-do family. The boy who longed for the shoes might have thanked the goddess for granting his prayer. Thinking so, the narrator narrates one more story of Mukesh, who belonged to a poor family in Simapuri, where many other children spend their life struggling hard to earn their livelihood. Mukesh worked in the Bengal factory, and even his family worked hard in the slum to have good life. But Mukesh had big dreams to fulfill. He dreamt to be a motor mechanic. He wanted to drive a car. When he met the narrator, he asked the narrator to accompany him to his house, which was rebuilt, and he took great pride in stating that he owned a house. When the narrator reaches Mukesh's house, she saw that the young lady cooking at the stove was very lean and weak. She did have a veil covering her face, but she welcomed the narrator. Mukesh introduced her to the narrator. She was Mukesh's sister in law. Mukesh lived his brother, his father, and his sister in law, and they worked in the Bengal factory. The family was unaware that it was illegal for the children to work in the Bengal factory in the severe conditions, where working near the furnaces would be hazardous for them. Unaware about the fact, Mukesh did the child labor and worked in that unhealthy environment for long. But he always dreamed to be a motor mechanic, and he thought that one fine day when he would be able to study, he will definitely fulfill. The web of poverty would always burden the children living in the slums. Together, they have imposed the baggage on the child that he cannot put down. This is what she thought to herself. Before they were aware about what they were doing and what they should do to have good lifestyle, the narrator thought that who should consider their problems and help them overcome the hardships of their life. But there was nobody who could who could understand them, and this is why they lived difficult life in Simapuri. The narrator, who was very embarrassed at first that she could not set a school for them in Simapuri, did not know how to help these children. But she shares her experiences in this chapter, making the readers realize that it is important to think about the underprivileged and help them so that they can fulfill their dreams.